Hi, I'm Nicholas Tutora. Welcome to Tutora Time. Well, the left keeps pushing this racial hatred, division among people in America. Coca-Cola last week, it was revealed in the news and online, they are giving employee training, teaching people how to be less white. If that's not racist, I don't know what is. How can you be less of what you are, less of what your skin color happens to be? You know, race is being used in America now for one reason, to divide and to gain political power. The people on the left who are pushing this racism narrative, they don't really care about what race anybody is. They just want to use it as a tool to divide people.
We must also step up the fight against resurgent neo-Nazism, white supremacy, and racially and ethnically motivated terrorism.
Race is fixed. It's also a happenstance of nature. It's not an achievement. It's not a skill to be a certain race. It's just chance. Everybody's got to be something, and we only come in a few different races, a few different models: black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, indigenous people, Middle Eastern. So there's not that many different models of humans. We only come in a few different models. And the left is using that fact to divide people, simply, like I said, to gain power.
But this term, there are legitimate white supremacist sympathizers that sit at the heart and at the core of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives.
If they can make white and black people be against each other or hate each other or be resentful of each other, then they could keep people divided forever. And they could keep nurturing that over and over again. These are the only Supremes I remember. Could you even call this group that anymore? Could you get away with it? You know, this term white privilege and white supremacy, to me, a white supremacist is like some neo-Nazi guy in his basement, you know, with Hitler posters or something like that. I've never come across anybody like that in my life. But they just throw this word white supremacy around any way they can in order to divide people. And it's racist by definition. What kind of supremacy? White supremacy. What kind of privilege? White privilege. You know, privilege is something that's earned over time. Okay, you have a right to certain things, but certain privileges, that's the definition of a privilege. You worked for it, and now you receive the benefit for it. There is not a imaginary white privilege that occurs across the board to people just because they're white. White people have all the same stresses and struggles that black people do. We're all focusing on paying our bills and taking care of the people we love and, you know, living the best life we can. And if you look at examples that the left gives of things that are white privilege, one of them is objective thinking. So to have objective thinking is in some way a white privilege. And truthfully, this is not very surprising coming from the left because this is the way they keep people down. During slavery, they didn't allow people to read. 2 + 2 = 4. And they're saying that to need the right answer from somebody is a sign of privilege. No, it's a right answer. It's a mathematically right answer. No matter what color you are, the mathematics and the physics of things have to work, or else you don't have any modern technology. Well, they are teaching young children in school about Black Lives Matter. First of all, what does a non-black child think when they look up at a poster and it says Black Lives Matter? They don't know the history of our country. They don't know about past injustices. They see a sign that says Black Lives Matter and they think, well, I'm not black. Do I matter? And if you think they don't, you're wrong. Children are highly susceptible. People are highly susceptible. Something can happen to you once in your life, and you spend the rest of your life worrying about it and fearing it. Sometimes it doesn't even have to happen at all. Sometimes just the thought of it happening is enough to terrify people. So there doesn't even have to be real racism out there. They just have to say there is. They just have to tell people you're automatically discriminated against because of your skin color, and people will believe it, whether it's true or not. Look, it's so foolish. The whole thing is so ridiculous. Barack Obama was elected president of the United States twice, right? We have a majority white country. So if the country was systemically racist, that could have never happened. I mean, Barack Obama ran against John McCain, probably the whitest of white people you're ever going to find. But if the country was systemically racist, they all would have automatically voted for the very white guy as opposed to the black guy. I mean, the narrative of systemic racism doesn't hold up. Have there been injustices in the past? Of course there have been. I was a school teacher for a while in the inner city in New York school. And when I got there to teach, I felt the differences in the school and the supplies and the various things. But, that was in the heart of a Democratic area in a Democrat-run school district by the New York City Teachers Union, all Democrat liberals. It's interesting that liberals seem to be the ones all the time talking about how everybody is so racist. I think it's because it's something that's in them and in their minds. People are often talking about what they're thinking about the most. And if you hear the things that Joe Biden says, like, you ain't black if you don't vote for him.
We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
In my opinion, we don't need white people leading the Democratic Party right now.
They're really the racists. I mean, Kamala Harris, his own vice president, was calling him a racist during the debates. I always say there's one race, the human race. And if you look on your list of white privilege no-nos, that's a no-no. It's considered white privilege or white supremacy or whatever they want to call it to say there's only one race, the human race. And there is. There is only one race, the human race. They're using race to divide us. A black person can never be white. A white person can never be black. And if they could keep us fighting over that, they could keep us fighting over that for years. The other thing that they point to as examples of white privilege, and it's in Black Lives Matter, is the nuclear family. They want to destroy the nuclear family and the patriarchy. So what they're saying is that a stable man, a responsible man who works and supports his family and takes care of his family is somehow a privilege, and we should be doing away with that. That doesn't help black children. That is just a straight attack on family structure. 75% of black children are born out of wedlock. A lot of the fathers aren't even there at all. So where does personal responsibility come in? When they talk about white privilege and passing wealth from one generation to another, you work hard and you save your money and you pass it to your children. That's a normal thing. Thomas Sowell, the great writer, the brilliant thinker, points out all the time how the advancements for black people were far faster before the civil rights movement than after the civil rights movement. Don't worry, break up your family and the government's going to take care of you. That has hampered black people. And, they also have the term African American, but I know a lot of people from the Caribbean who don't like that term, African American. They're like, I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from the islands. So just to lump people in as one thing in one way is really disgraceful. Bob Marley has a song, Redemption Song, where he has the line, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." So it doesn't really matter who you are or where you are. If you're enslaved in your mind, if you're believing you're a victim in your mind, you're going to act and behave as a victim. I know many young black people, and I ask them, how do you feel about all this preaching about systemic racism? They say they've never encountered it. They haven't been followed around in stores. They don't feel like they've been denied any opportunities because they're black. They don't feel like the deck is stacked against them because they're black. But the left wants you to believe that. And why? Because it's easy political power. There definitely have been injustices, like I said, in our past. But we never actually got up and taught in schools the way they're teaching now that, whiteness is something to be overcome.
America needs to repent for its worship of whiteness on full display.
People in this country are very accepting of everybody. The other thing about race in this country that nobody ever points out And, to me, this has been something that I've thought about since I'm young. 350,000, approximately 300,000 white Union soldiers died in the American Civil War in order to free black people, to give them their rights. The Bible teaches the greatest sacrifice one can make for another is to lay down their life for them. So I don't see any other example in history of one race laying down their lives so another race can be free. When the country was founded, they could not end slavery at that moment. They would have never got a country. They would have never pulled it together. But they did make sure they put in the founding document that all men are created equal. All people are created equal. And that was the catalyst, really, to start the change. It was a slow process, but it starts over time. If you want to respect the people who were enslaved, slavery is a horrible, disgusting thing. But it's also happening now, today, in Africa. People are being enslaved right now in Africa, and nobody's saying anything about it. But it's that phrase, all men are created equal, is what really got the whole thing going in the first place. Without that consciousness, there is no civil rights. There is no, well, we should all be the same. Other countries that had slavery did not have that belief that all people are created equal. So they never worried about, are the slaves being treated humanely or not? Because they didn't assume they needed to be, because they didn't consider them equal. Things are not perfect from day one. And if you really want to honor the lives of the people who were enslaved in centuries past, then you should live free. Now, what's the point of being free if you're going to live in the past and talk about injustice? I worked as a personal development coach with people for many years in companies, and never once did somebody come to sit in front of me and I told them, you're hampered and you can't change and you can't grow because of something that happened. I'm not responsible for anything that some white guy did in the Confederacy in 1850. My family didn't even show up till 1905, 1900, around there. People started coming from Italy through Ellis Island. People from Africa still come to America today, and from the Caribbean, they come to America today. Why would black people choose to immigrate to a country that supposedly is systemically racist? Do the people who promote these ideas like white supremacy and, the horrors of slavery, which obviously was horrible, but do they think that white people were treating themselves to a day in the park in the meantime? Look at the history of Europe. After slavery was ended, 50 years after slavery was ended, World War I was taking place. Wholesale slaughter of white European men on the battlefield. Millions and millions and millions of people died. In Europe, before the Americas were discovered, there was slaves, people were serfs, the lords had control of their life. It's not like all white people who were the same race were kind to each other. The human race is brutal much of the time in what it does. And all races have been slaves. White people have been slaves. Middle Eastern people have been slaves. Black people have been slaves. And all people have held slaves also. Isn't it so much better that we just see each other as individuals? Or else what has the fight been for? To me, it's like you were in a terrible relationship for years or dysfunctional marriage or an abusive marriage, and then you get out, and then you spend the rest of your life talking with your new partner about how terrible your old partner was. Things aren't going to change unless we let them go. We cannot let ourselves be divided by race. We have to call out these people who are pushing this agenda of race baiting. We have to call them out for what they are. They're just hucksters. It's a way of keeping power, and it's a payday. It always pays. A book on it, a speaking tour. It's a payday. It's a payday. And these things like white supremacy and white privilege, these aren't sciences. This isn't like a chemical experiment. This isn't H2O. This is an opinion, and a bad opinion at that, a disempowering opinion at that. Also, a lot of what goes into this, I believe, is people trying to justify their own life. People have like internal battles with their parents and choices that they made, and they want to be accepted. So they say that, people who don't agree with them are racist. People don't accept the choices they make are racist. Nobody has to accept your choice. Nobody really cares about your choice, to be perfectly honest. Nobody really cares what you're doing in your private life or what you're doing. As long as you're consenting adults, nobody really cares what's going on. And how could you also be religious? How could you be a Christian or Jew or any religion that truly believes in one God and say that one group of people is better than another group of people? They're not. I mean, I don't know anybody who believes that somebody's ability is dictated by the amount of pigmentation that they have in their skin. Nobody believes that. And nobody nowadays, young people today, should not be made to apologize for privilege of their forefathers. People worked their butts off to get ahead in this country. My parents were born in 1930 and 1932. They were children during the Great Depression. And, in the Depression, they didn't have anything. They were mostly broke most of the time. They had no money. They worked hard. My grandfathers were both cab drivers in New York City. There was no privilege there. When my father passed away, much of what he left for his family was taken by the government for him to pay higher Medicaid rates than people without money. So his life work and his money went to taking care of other people who didn't earn as much. It didn't go to his family. Maybe the reason that the people on the left think that there's something called white privilege is because maybe the white people on the left are so stupid. And maybe they just get ahead, and like John Kerry and Joe Biden, maybe they know they're empty-headed bubbleheads with nothing really to say, so they figure they're just getting ahead because of their skin color. That's really kind of the best I could come up with for them at this point. But it's a really, really destructive narrative. You could see it starting to take really ugly effects on people. What are we supposed to do when we see each other? Apologize to each other? Say something extra nice to each other? What does it mean? It just doesn't add up, what they want us to believe about race. We should really push back against it. We're causing so much destruction based on this narrative. They say this about systemic racism, which is whether you believe in it or not, you're it. If you're white, you have it, whether you know it or not. Even if you don't think you have it, you have it. If you think you have it, you have it. If you don't think you have it, you have it. No matter what you say, you have it. I mean, come on, folks. It's really ridiculous. Who believes this? Does anybody really believe this? But everybody's afraid to push back because they don't want to be tagged, as racist and all this kind of nonsense. You know the way the left goes around changing the meaning of words all the time? I think it's time that we start changing the meaning of this word racist, because they're going to use it forever to try to hurt people and disempower people and silence the voices they don't like. So why don't we change the term of racist? Why doesn't racism be people who believe that all races are the same and that we could all live together in harmony? If you're a racist, you love all races. Just change the meaning of the word. There's been so much destruction through human history, and we fought so hard to try to come together. Also, the United States, when they talk about race relations, there's no other country in the world like the United States where everybody has come together and everybody's living in the same country. If anything, the United States is proof that people can live together and get along. And when they do, they create the greatest country in the world. When they leave behind all those old stories, you have people who are fighting in the Middle East and other parts of the world, ethnically fighting for centuries because they divide by ethnicity and race. And this is what the left is trying to do. They're trying to create hatred. America is the cure for that, is the place where you come and you drop your backstory and you start from where you are now, as the person you are now. Nobody alive today in the United States owned slaves. Nobody in the United States today was a slave. We're all equal. We're all on the same footing. Every opportunity is open to every single person in this country. Anybody could learn anything. Everybody has access to technology. Anybody can achieve anything they want in America. And the proof is overwhelming. To argue otherwise is just to lie. And to preach permanent victimhood is criminal. You're teaching people that they're permanently victims because of their skin color and what happened in the past. It's a form of self-hatred, and you're teaching them to hate others. All that energy that's going into hate can be being used to grow yourself and to better yourself. But this is also what happens when you take God out of the equation and when you take ethics and morality out of the equation. When you take goodness out of the equation, hate has to come in, and hate has to be your driving force to try to make people change or to manipulate people. We have to stop being controlled by race. It really makes me sick to my stomach when I see people trying to play this card to divide people. Also, this scientific theory of white privilege and systemic racism, it doesn't hold, because if a theory is true, then it should hold all the time. If gravity is true, which it is, every time something comes up, you jump up, it comes down, unless, the jet is holding it up, but eventually that's coming down too. A scientific law works all the time, but there are black people in this country who have made more money than most white people will ever make. LeBron James has made more money than 95% of white people will ever make in their lives. More, 99%. So it's absurd. The black people I know are doctors, lawyers, teachers, decent politicians, family people. People who are achieving something in their life. You don't spend your life looking in the rearview mirror, or else you're never going to get ahead. Come together. Let's all push back against this horrible, divisive narrative that they're trying to push. They're trying to turn society upside down by preaching that there's imaginary hate everywhere, and they know it and you don't. It doesn't exist. Fight back, people. Stand up to this nonsense. It's destructive. No matter what race you are, no matter what color you are, no matter what you believe, this is a destructive narrative, and we as a people have to reject it. Well, I'm Nicholas Tutora, and I'll talk to you again on Tutora Time.